Hi, my name is Bob Greenyer and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So welcome to O-Day, Shielding Opportunity, Enabling Relentless. Thank you for joining me this 22nd of September 2024 and happy birthday to Corky Goss, who's in the house. I have an echo, do I? It's better now, is it? Okay, I might need to change it for the other camera settings. Let me see. I guess we might have an echo here as well. No, maybe not. Yes. I'll kill the echo there. It should be gone now. And we should be okay on this one. So, hello Martin Kemp, Space Case, Artifact, Venom K, Matthew McNally, Earthworm Jim, D2105K, Steve A, Green Hiker. Some new names in the house. This is great to see. Hi Nick Moore. Hi Phonic. Hi Kishore Nagi Darshan Namara. Wow, that's a good one. Mr. Gate Mode. Hi Carmen Miller. Thank you for your emails this week. And yes, Corky is in the house. Hi Josh S, Green Hiker, Kevin Smith, Philo Fiction, Tiziano Fulcieri. Great to have you here. Hi Mika Avila, Lion Hunter, Per Nicola Haukeland. Hi Mazum Ahmad. Hi Matthew Reynolds. Thank you for joining me here. Did I miss anyone? I hope I didn't miss anyone. So, what am I thinking about here? Well, as you know, I have introduced this new word, relentless, into the coming approach that I hope that we can achieve moving forward. And practically, to achieve relentless, we need to keep everyone safe, and those that potentially would like to test a minimum viable product would also like to keep them safe, so that the opportunities that is afforded by O will be shielded, enabling relentless. So there's lots of meaning going on here. Hi Screwdriver Tuning and Harry. Hi Stephen B. Halls. Wonderful to see you all here. Okay, so as you may be aware, I have recently talked about the 3 aims of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. These are completely unchanged from the original 3 aims on quantumheat.org. The first aim was to show the world there was a new practical primary energy source. We called it the New Fire initially, and I think around about 2016, maybe earlier, I called it the New Eternal Fire in brackets, because obviously it's eternal. And then once shown, help develop people's understanding of what the new fire is, or the new eternal fire. Well, I hope that we have an understanding and that we are helping people to develop their understanding of what it is. Of course, we may be wrong, but we do the best we can. And then, as I believe these 2 are effectively done, we are moving on to the third aim of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, which was to help promote the development and uptake of the new eternal fire in all its various guises. And to that end, we are talking about the term relentless. And this is a slide from the presentation that was made here, which I have shared from the Advanced Energy Systems Symposium, Seminar, whatever you like to call it, here in Brno in the Czech Republic. Thank you to all those that came. And Number one is to ensure that key historical work is not lost. And I can say that Jordan Collin has been here for a little while. He's been helping me to start processing the material from one Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto. His wife joined him a few days back so that he isn't without wife, which would be terrible. And they're working together at the moment, which is fantastic. So thank you to them. And there will be a Kickstarter coming soon about this, and you will have an opportunity to secure for yourself a print, for instance, of the original prints from Matsumoto's work, his journey. Original prints, often they are dated on the back and from the original printing process, so they are full authentic prints. So there will be lots of things up for grabs in that Kickstarter to enable that. And on Wednesday, I will be talking with Eric and the team and talking about how we can make the timeline, which will be accessible for people to delve into his work, both video recordings and logbooks and so forth, ultimately further down the line, which I think and I hope will be the most detailed record of a significant scientific discovery ever made available to the public from beginning to end. So it would be kind of a unique thing. Then we'd like to do a thermal generator, a minimum viable product. And as I've said before, this will be based on the Kladoff Griggs type devices. And they are both out of patent, even though Griggs type derivative devices are available for purchase. The idea would be that in each of these cases, there would be plans, parametric models for people to build their own variations of it, understanding the risks and potential benefits. And we or whoever else would be able to move on and improve on the minimum viable product. And obviously we would hope that those people that did so would share back into the community. But the main purpose here is to, as I said, help promote the development and uptake of the new Eternal Fire in all its various guises. The next one would be the direct electrical generator. I have talked at the conference in more detail in Strasbourg about how we intend to achieve that. The work is being undertaken to get Henk and other parties progressed in a way such that they can start exploring that opportunity. Again, a minimum viable product intended to be produced from that. Element processor, most specifically for remediation of nuclear waste. And there was an experiment done that I wanted to do for a long time. As you are all aware, that is the experiment of testing carbon-14 accelerated beta decay. And we have our first sample, and the intent is to send that off to the beamline with a control sample and see if just around about 2 minute processing significantly altered the age in inverted commas of that charcoal. If it did, then basically carbon-14 dating has a problem. If it didn't, or it is not conclusive, we will attempt to run more experiments with longer processing. Dr. George Eagley said that it doesn't really do much until you've done about 3 minutes, and we know that this is an aggregating process, so you need to get past the diality angle according to Freiberger, or you need to get the clustering to a certain level before it is able to do the magic, as it would seem. Was that achieved in the plasma reactor in the few minutes that it was run here in the advanced energy systems? I don't know. You will see. all of the lead up to that. You will see the finishing of the reconditioning of the reactor. You will see the running of the reactor, and you will see the teardown of the reactor. And then you will we will hopefully see what comes back from the beamline. If that works, then we will have a method to conclusively and easily demonstrate the remediation of beta isotopes, which are the major toxic component that comes out of fission reactors. Of course, we understand from Kladov's work, and we understand from the work of the hydrowave technology, that this is possible with those type of cavitation processes. However, Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto suggested a kind of more plasma-based reactor. So more options are better than no options, but just showing the principle and being able to show that principle on a regular basis would potentially have a huge implication for the viability of small modular nuclear reactors and their overall lifetime safety and risk profile. So more energy options are good. Then the materials processor obviously is, in my view, the Wintex, the Frank Polivka Wintex replication and variants thereof. And this allows us to effectively maybe recycle concrete and to create soil from otherwise difficult waste and prepare biomass for preservation in a rapid fashion. The last one is propulsion. I always prefer the term propulsion than anti-gravity. In that respect, I am like Kenneth Radford Shoulders because it works at any point in space. And this has probably upset the most people. But anyway, propulsion. And what you will see later this week, on Thursday, there will be a meeting of the group that has assembled itself to coordinate a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. And then on Friday, there will be an open forum, probably on Zoom, where you will be able to attend and listen to the expert that is proposing to put that together for the community and how that will potentially manifest itself. But in brief, it would be an entity that is designed to facilitate the production of these minimum viable products. And what is a decentralized autonomous organization? Well, here it says a type of organization that operates through rules encoded as computer programs called smart contracts. These organizations are decentralized, meaning they don't have a central authority or leadership. Instead, decisions are made collectively by the members through a voting process. DAOs are built on blockchain technology, which ensures transparency and security. This setup allows for a community-led approach where the organization's rules and transactions are recorded on the blockchain, making them tamper-proof and accessible to all members. So the idea here is not only are we relentless, but the aim is to be resilient. That is, it's not an organization that is controlled by people that could be taken down. It is not country specific. It is all of humanity based, and that the information and the processes and whatever transactions are going on are stored in the blockchain and therefore drilling into by parties interested in being part of the process and observing the process in action. So I've got a couple of other notes here on DAOs. I'm not an expert in DAO. That expert will be there on Friday to talk about this with people. But here's a few things from ChatGPT, which may be wrong because it's a big circle jerk, but the expert will be there on Friday. But the DAO will have a treasury, and it's a crucial component of a decentralized autonomous organization, and it's responsible for managing the organization's funds and assets. And here is a breakdown of how it typically works. The funding sources are from for the treasury is funded through various means such as token sales, transaction fees, donations, or profits from investments. The management and allocation, the funds in the treasury are managed according to the rules set by the DAO's smart contracts. These rules dictate how funds can be allocated for different purposes like development, marketing, legal expenses, and other operational costs. Voting and proposals, members of the DAO can propose how to use the funds. These proposals are then voted on by the community. If the proposal receives enough votes, the smart contract executes the transaction automatically. Transparency and security. All transactions and fund allocations are recorded on the blockchain, ensuring transparency and security. This allows members to track how funds are being used and ensures that the treasury is managed in line with the DAO's objectives. Long-term sustainability. Effective treasury management is essential for the long-term success of the DAO. It ensures that the organization can sustain its operations and achieve its goals without running out of funds. Okay, so that's supposedly about DAO treasury. Like I say, the expert will be there, as I understand it, on Friday for the open community call. This is, as far as I can understand it, the best way we can have an open, traceable, self-recording process by which the community can watch the process of development of these minimum viable products. And it's supposed to be resilient. I've called for the most important thing of the organization to be resilient, such that the information that's put into it cannot be taken down and the organization cannot be taken down, and those kind of aspects. A DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, has several features that can make it more resilient compared to traditional organizations. Firstly, it has decentralization. Unlike traditional organizations with a central authority, DAOs distribute power among all members. This reduces the risk of single points of failure and makes the organization more robust against internal and external threats. Transparency. All transactions and decisions in the DAO are recorded in the blockchain, making them transparent and easily auditable. This transparency helps prevent fraud and ensures that all members are aware of the organization's activities. Smart contracts. DAOs operate through smart contracts which automatically execute decisions based on predefined rules. This reduces the risk of human error and ensures that the organization operates consistently and fairly. Community governance. Decisions in a DAO are made collectively by its members through a voting process. This democratic approach ensures that the interests of the community are prioritized and it can adapt quickly to changes or challenges. Global participation. DAOs can attract members from around the world, bringing diverse perspectives and expertise. This global participation can enhance the organization's resilience by incorporating a wide range of ideas and solutions. Immutable records. The blockchain's immutable nature ensures that once data is recorded, it cannot be altered. This provides a secure and reliable record of all transactions and decisions, which is crucial for maintaining trust and accountability. So I think based on that kind of overview, and we will hear from the expert that is doing the work to set up the proposed DAO. You will have your input right at the beginning of this process. And I think unless anyone has a much better idea about how to make a resilient organization that is easily traceable, trackable, and that we can all participate in the voting process on, I think it's probably the way forward to enable the relentless process. So I don't know whether you've got any comments there. I'll just have a quick look before we move on to the main subject of the day. But I just wanted to give you a heads up with the intention that we have been working on over the last several weeks for the community, several months actually. Yeah, so FPV, Angel, and online, offline backup, most important. Yeah, absolutely. That is part of the resilience that we are interested in fostering in this organization. Yeah, so there's, I have a lot of questions. I put some stern requirements on the structure of the DAO, but ultimately it is an organization that will be community owned and led, and I believe that that is the right way to do this. There is no perfect organization to do something like this. The kind of thing that I'm proposing with Relentless hasn't really been done other than for something like the Manhattan Project. Obviously, in the case of the Manhattan Project, the individuals were sworn to secrecy. That's not what we're trying to achieve here. We're trying to achieve swearing to open approach. The people in the Manhattan Project were extremely well funded, offered incredibly good working and education for their family and pensions and housing and all of the rest. That is not what we are proposing here. So, like, if there is an incredibly much better way to move forward and achieve this in an open way where community participants can interact with the organization, then let's hear it. But DAOs exist for a reason. And so I've asked for the person who's an expert in this to give examples. I'm sure you can find them of successful DAOs. And yeah, we shall see. Like, I'm pretty much as new to this as many of you are, but we can't find ourselves in another 12 years still talking about shoulda, woulda, coulda. We need to take this to the next level. We are on stage 3 of the aims of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, and we need to find a way to deliver on the opportunity. Okay, so that is that. Right, so what are we talking about today? Well, I will go back and we will start. So the opportunity really is huge with O. It's actually ridiculously immense, and these opportunities are highly disruptive to various industries, incredibly disruptive. And one thing, thinking about the protection of the relentless process, is to shield it from attacks that were and have been very successful in the past. That is, attacking parties that are doing the research, attacking the organization, attacking the finances of the organization. And we are in a weird situation that possibly we are dealing with a technology that does not produce ordinary radiation. It appears to do nuclear processes, but it doesn't produce the radiations that everyone knows about and can detect. And those are alpha, beta, gamma, X-ray type radiation. Although in certain circumstances, things like X-rays can occur, and that is what we will address in some of the discussion tonight. The major component that we need to shield from is when it is generally accepted that Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation, exotic vacuum objects in the neutral form, strange radiation are a thing, and this will be, in my view, accepted in time, even by the mainstream community, that they then potentially suggest that this is a reason why people cannot work in this space. So at the Advanced Energy Systems Conference, I reiterated my desire for someone to take up the opportunity that has been afforded by the results of the Dubna Research Facility and Shishkin et al. In shielding for Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation, EVOs, strange radiation. And I detailed that the way that I would approach that initially would be for the shielding of the radiation of this type that is produced from the ionizing radiation that results from granite and or radon. So when you have uranium and it decays, you get radon 222 or whatever it is, and this has high energy emissions, and these can produce Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation and clusters, and that these have secondary issues, and we're going to address some of the science that has explored this, and also the opportunities in there. And there were one of the people here today who's in the chat, he and a friend or colleague of his, a Swiss guy, so an Italian guy who's a nuclear physicist, and a Swiss guy who's an investment stroke real estate guy from Switzerland, so an Italian physicist and a real estate sort of investment guy from Switzerland. They, as I understand it, first saw me present my initial thoughts without having looked at any of Malcolm Bendel's thunderstorm generators. My initial thoughts in Zurich last year, and they came also to Strasbourg. And after my presentation, they approached me and said, could they come to the conference here in Brno? And I said, okay, yeah, that might be possible. There's a bit of space. And so they joined at the conference here in Brno. And whilst we were in Strasbourg, they said that they were looking for things that they could take to market. And so I thought, as I've said this a number of times, I would like to see this taken to market, this shielding, and particularly from a helping people that are living in high radon areas. I would like to see that happen. But in the back of my mind, I see that as a means to providing shielding for technologies that we would be developing in the Relentless program. And after the conference, they said they were driving home and they were thinking of things that maybe they could get involved with. And they wrote to me and said, we would like to see if we can do something with the shielding. And I said, fantastic. So I'm hoping to have an open call. The intention is to set up an organization in Switzerland. And this would be looking to work with a lab and to test various shielding approaches with generators potentially of strange radiation, and to test their effectiveness, test the ones that are already known and in the patent by Alexander Shishkin, which we're going to have a look at, and some of the implications there, and develop a massive production of the type of material that is required both in paintable form and in pre-prepared cuttable sheets that people can use to shield their reactors. So, for instance, if we are to assume that the thunderstorm generator has these flux loops coming in and out, then it would be using this technology. So if it is, that would result in potentially the emission of strange radiation. If we are to assume that it is not doing this, that is to say it is not able to do nuclear transmutation through charge cluster based process and exotic vacuum process, and we say that the thunderstorm generator absolutely cannot do exotic vacuum object plasmoid based transmutation of matter, then we don't need to worry. But if we're saying that it does, then we would really like to have in place a organization that's able to produce the shielding material to make those devices safe. But more than anything, as we go through the relentless development process of technologies that employ this underlying science, thank you very much, Vanilla Isis, for that $20 donation. It's very, very helpful. As we go through this process of researchers working on developing the minimum viable products for you, the world, right? They will be potentially putting themselves at personal risk with the type of radiation that is not accepted in mainstream science. We don't want them to go and suffer that risk. So there is an urgency to be able to produce some shielding material for researchers that will be part of the DAO and those researchers that are operating within the DAO to participate in the relentless process. And then when working embodiments are produced, let's say, for instance, let's say Andrea Rossi has a device that works. Well, if it works using charge clusters, and ostensibly his documentation points to the fact that it would be doing that, there is also a potential for it to emit strange radiation. And therefore, those devices, whatever they may be, will need shielding. And I'm not saying this will be the best shielding that could ever be produced. What I'm saying is we need to minimize the exposure to this radiation as we understand it. And ideally, when we have working devices of a range of type of devices, obviously particularly cavitation devices, they seem to have a very high flux of emissions of this, and we'll look into this. And also anything that has spark gaps and anything that has fast rotating objects, this will be critical. Yes, so Lion Hunter, thank you for your $40 donation. That's very appreciated. Yes, using a cavitator for the strange radiation source. So we have right now, Binjuan Huang is in the process of moving towards commercialization of cavitation-based heat system. Now, in some cases, perhaps in many cases, large-scale heat production systems using cavitation, which in my view will produce strange radiation emissions, could be sited in places where those emissions would not affect any biological material in any significant way. But it would be great if these modular devices could be deployed anywhere, knowing that there was a minimization of emissions. So as I said before, I've literally seen a generator that says no one should be anywhere near this generator when it's operating in this city of Brno, outside a container that's over a manhole, and the generator is operating, and there is a woman with an infant in a pram not more than a few meters away. And with the best will in the world, technologies that have a risk can often be put in situations where the risk hasn't been identified and the general public do not know the risks that they're facing when they are near these devices. So if they're properly used and they've got the proper spacing, then everyone's fine, right? But sometimes you want your systems to fail safe. Like if everyone in the process is an utter idiot, like the guy using the device and the people that are near the device being used are just being humans, occupying the space in space-time that they want to occupy, they shouldn't have to concern themselves with, is the device I'm standing next to causing my baby harm? It should be, it defaults to being a safe thing to be around. And so there is very little risk. Thank you very much, Black Tie, and thank you very much, Earthworm Jim. It's very, very kind of you. So we cannot have a situation where we have resilience, total resilience, if we have a type of radiation that will be identified at some point in the future that leads to a regulatory situation where these kind of devices, which are a massive opportunity but highly disruptive, are able to be attacked on that. So we need to have a solution. So the idea is that we roll it out based on the fact that there is a known problem in high radon areas. And that is that if you breathe in the radon gas that comes from the uranium or whatever that's in the granite, that can settle in your lungs, and it goes through some other decays and it ends up giving you lung cancer. So typically in these situations, what you will have is you will have the accumulation of the gas, particularly under the floorboards if you don't have a basement or a cellar. If you have a basement or a cellar, you will have it accumulating in that lower ground space. And so typically what they do is they have good ventilation systems that keeps fresh air flowing through the cellar space, so there's no build-up of radon gas and its progeny in terms of toxic materials on surfaces and stuff. And so these systems are quite effective, and it's known really that if you have one of these systems in your cellar, that your risk of exposure to the radon gas is actually fairly minimal. What is not understood is that the radon gas itself can, in the process of ionization, produce Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation, which is the neutral form, equivalent to exotic vacuum objects, which are neutral, equivalent to strange radiation, which is neutral, and that is not able to be moved by the airflow that you have. Why? Well, because it's neutral. It doesn't interact with charged particles, or particles per se. It goes in the direction it wants to go. So that stuff that is still synthesized can still permeate into the living space. And it is that thing that currently is not being shielded for, that whilst it might not have necessarily the lung type cancer issues, and it weirdly might have, and don't quote me on this, and this isn't health advice, it might have at certain stages in someone's life a actual net benefit, and we'll see how that occurs. But so Mika Avila is saying, is this everywhere or in certain areas? We're going to look at exactly that data. Okay, so you're going to see the potential opportunity here just in two regions, for instance. I'm going to talk about something absolutely incredibly amazing, and then I'm going to talk about the risks and opportunities that's going on here, right? So this type of radiation might possibly be beneficial at certain points in, for instance, a human's development. But as you get later on in life, it may switch from being a net gain to a net negative. And as you get older, it might accelerate, for instance, cancers. And I'll show you some of the evidence for that that was established in Russia. I will show you some anecdotal evidence and some very weird things that as an electrosensitive person and my personal history, I want to explore with you in this video. And possibly, I think this might be the most important video in the history of trying to get this technology usable by humanity in a safe way. Okay. Right, so I'm just going to see if there's any comments here. Right. So I'm going to look at a couple of papers and things by Shishkin. And the first thing I want to talk about actually is radiation per se a problem in the local environment? Well, I actually used to live in Kerala, as you may know, and I have exposed myself to some beaches where it has placer deposits of thorium, I mean very high levels of thorium material, where there's a very high background radiation. And I've spoken about this before. I think I've even shown the papers before, but I'm going to show it again here. And this is on PubMed, and I will bring up the link now and we can have a look at this. And this is actually one of the highest areas of background radiation in the world. And it is literally on the beaches of Kerala, and the people that are exposed to the highest background radiation are the fishermen of Kerala, and they're some of the first people I ever met in Kerala, and I helped them haul in some large tuna before the Japanese fishing boats got there a couple of years later and basically made that a bit difficult. And the paper here it's on PubMed. It was published in 2009 in January, and it's called Background Radiation and Cancer Incidents in Kerala, India, Karangapalli Cohort Study. The coastal belt of Karangapalli, Kerala, India is known for the high background radiation from thorium-containing monazite sand. Okay. In coastal panchayats, these are kind of like regions, median outdoor radiation levels are more than 4 milligrays per year. In certain locations on the coast, it's as high as 70, I think that's milligrays per year. Although high background radiation has been repeatedly shown to increase the frequency of chromosome aberrations in the circulating lymphocytes of exposed persons, its carcinogenic effect is still unproven. A cohort of 385,103 residents in this particular panchayat was established in the 1990s to evaluate the health effects of high background radiation. Okay? Based on radiation level measurements, a radiation subcohort consisting of 173,067 residents was chosen. Cancer incidence in this subcohort aged 30 to 84 years was analysed. Cumulative radiation dose for each individual was estimated based on outdoor and indoor dosimetry of each household, taking into account sex and age-specific house occupancy factors. Following 69,958 residents for 10.5 years on average, 736,586 person years of observation were accumulated, and 1,379 cancer cases, including 30 cases of leukemia, were identified by the end of 2005. Poisson regression analysis of cohort data, stratified by sex, attained age, follow-up interval, socio-demographic factors, and BD smoking, showed no excess cancer risk from exposure to terrestrial gamma radiation. The excess relative risk of cancer, excluding leukemia, was estimated to be this. In site-specific analysis, no cancer site was significantly related to cumulative radiation dose. Leukemia was not significantly related to high background radiation either, although the statistical power of the study might not be adequate due to low dose. Our cancer incidence study, together with previously reported cancer mortality studies in high background radiation area of Yangjiang, China, suggests that it is unlikely that estimates of risk at low doses are substantially greater than currently believed. Essentially, they didn't really suffer much from being in this high radiation area. Now, what I do know about these coastal people, and I have videos which I can show you of people and how they live in these coastal areas, is one, in their houses, they typically have no cellars. Two, their houses typically do not have any glass in the windows. They are literally iron bars in wooden frame. There's no glass. So the idea of accumulated gases in a enclosed space are, it just doesn't happen. And three, the fishermen, which are exposed to the very highest doses because of the placer deposits on the beach, where it's so intense, the radiation. These guys are exposed in a very interesting way. Firstly, there's very strong coastal winds there. I experienced them many times. The part of their body that's actually closest to the ground, obviously, is their legs. And the legs contain the femurs. And the femurs have the marrow in. And the marrow is producing leukocytes or whatever, white blood cells. Okay? This is very, very important, as you will see when we look at the research into biological creatures exposed to strange radiation, or Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation. Okay, so my argument, and I'm just going to put it flag in the sand here, is that, and you'll see the data, that exposure to strange radiation, chi, life force, condensed life force, which it can effectively appear as, and you'll see a bit of this, it actually takes part in biological processes. And when you can condense this material and put it into a carrier medium, it can accelerate life. It accelerates cell division. And you'll see in one study where it accelerated or modified the rate of production of nucleation of cells in the bone marrow, and also the presence of the level of white blood cells in the body. And these type of white blood cells produce hydrogen peroxide, and they destroy cancer cells. And you could have a scenario where the immune systems of people living in Kerala are constantly charged and driven hard by exposure to this type of radiation, such that if they do develop nascent malignant cells, that they are appetized or apoptized, or basically caused to self-destruct or are killed by this hydrogen peroxide method that the body has as part of its method of destroying rogue cells. And this fits with my proposed method of using strange radiation as a means to treat non-leukemia, that is blood-based cancers. Blood-based cancers, obviously the blood is there, and so it will also go through potentially a treatment zone that would be focused on, which I mentioned in the past, the femur of the animal. This is not health advice. This is based on cutting-edge science and my understanding of a type of radiation that is not generally recognized, but I think we are going to be potentially coming into a new golden age of understanding the relationship of what radiation can do in terms of creating something that accelerates life, and how to skew that life promoting force to extend life rather than cause damage in life. Okay, so essentially we have a situation where the highest radiation place on Earth, which is where I used to live, and I used to go to these beaches, as I've said many times, often on the weekend to chill out and lie on this sand and surf next to this sand. I feel rudely healthy, and I don't think there was any problem with me exposed to this. And here it is, the evidence over many hundreds of thousands of person years that they don't find a particularly different ratio of damage to the persons living there. Right. Now, for those that don't know what I'm talking about with strange radiation, we're going to show a quick video, or rather a, let me find this video, and it's called A New Type of Penetrating Radiation by Alexander Shishkin. And we'll just run through this here quickly. Make a new tab here. And we'll go through the adverts, because that'll be annoying. Okay. So basically this video, it's called A New Type of Penetrating Radiation. You can find it on the Martin Fleischmann Memorial YouTube site. And it was presented in October 2018. I had the pleasure of witnessing it there in Sochi. In the introduction to this, I talk about the fact that the first, or the discoverer of characteristic X-rays, Charles Glover Barkla, and he received the Nobel Prize for the discovery of characteristic X-ray radiation, which is how we determine elements typically in ordinary matter. He actually found this thing that he called J radiation, or the J phenomenon, and he spent basically the rest of his life trying to work out what it was. It was these high energy photons that were being, or energy particles or something. And several other people at the time tried to observe this, and it was never really nailed down what this type of radiation was. And I also pointed to the fact that Martin Fleischmann talks about these high energy things that can't come from even the K shells in a atom, where they were possibly coming from. And this was an interview with Christopher P. Tinsley in Infinite Energy in the 1990s. And so this was my introduction to his presentation, and you can go and have a look at this in your own time. And they are talking about this common cosmophysical factor. You should go and read the 2012 account by Simon Schnoll, and who basically says that all random processes in chemistry, biophysics, and physics, including fluctuation, the decay rate of radioactive elements, they have some common cosmophysical factor, an agent which actively influences all of these random processes. And this is the cosmic flux of these clusters and available clusters in the environment. Okay. Now, he then goes on to talk about these traces that he observed in the case of a cavitator. And there were these little birdie traces that we know now. And he will show the device here. They found these pits and these kind of like weird tracks left behind underneath the birdies. And they were determined to be caused by these blowing up structures. And he gives a list in this presentation of the type of devices that produce these type of radiation emissions. Hydrodynamic generator, so this is like a cavitation device. From revolving bodies made of various materials, and he quotes titanium and cadmium here. So when you've got something revolving quickly, it will produce these things. You can get it with materials that have been irradiated with gamma radiation, as well as from actual gamma sources. So like if you irradiate some materials with gamma sources, they can aggregate these clusters, and then later on the material can re-emit the charge clusters that have been captured, let's say by a piece of metal. Okay, and these things are the same as exotic vacuum objects. They are the same things as Ken Shoulders were talking about, and we know that these things can live in metals indefinitely, and we've also identified that they can live in the oxygen dissolved into water. So they can come directly from gamma sources, and obviously John Hutchison used uranite. So uranite would produce gamma sources, and the gamma sources would therefore produce these strange radiation, these Magneto Toro Electrical clusters. You can do high voltage pulses and observe it on X-rays. corona streamer discharges. So these things will actually be produced from anything where you get a corona streamer. What is a corona streamer? This is what you see in a plasma globe. This is what you will get producing these structures. And then lastly, from Shakparanov and Spielman. The Shakparanov generator, the Mobius strip generator, we have shown before. Okay. And then he talks about what they are determined with these craters is that they could establish that depending on the atomic weight, that they could determine the diameter within 5% with the diameter of the microcrater in the film plane is directly proportional to the atomic weight A of the excited nuclei, and it gives you the number of micrometers, and this is the ratio. So you apply 0.078 micrometers to the atomic weight, and you get the diameter of the crater that's produced, and then you know what atom it was that produced that pit. And they also determined the depth with a similar factor in their work. So it's an incredibly detailed study. And they call these things string vortex solitons as well. And that they believe they are an ordered vortex structure of cold neutrinos, or relic or background neutrinos. And the reason they assume that is because they interact with beta isotopes and promote their decay. Okay, and this is something we know, and this is what we are basing our material processing in terms of remediating nuclear waste on. And as they pass through material with a high degree of probability, they acquire the properties of the cores of the material. Whether they acquire the actual cause is a different matter, but there is some suggestion that they do. And then he talks about, well, this is a profile of a crater when it comes up here. When it comes up, he says, so this is a profile of the crater. So the core has been shot into the cellulose here and left a crater. And then he talks about the damaging factor, and he says that based on the microcrater, they can work out the energy that's involved with this. And then from that, they can work out that this has the equivalent of 23.6 mega electron volts, and the damage that will do to red blood cells is saying that if you absorb that energy, the red blood cell will be fatally damaged, i.e. that the red blood cell will be destroyed by the particle being shot out of a failing exotic vacuum object / Magneto Toro Electrical cluster. For white blood cells, for leukocytes, let's say, because the mass is bigger, they say it could cause damage to the leukocyte, and this could lead to leukemia. Okay, blood cancer. Okay. So he shows several other things here, and he talks here also, he's talking about the risk from a cavitator, his particular cavitator, and how he calculated the risk. And his conclusion is that irradiation of the human body for a short time in the location of his particular cavitator can lead to irreversible consequences. This is an extremely intense warning. This is something that needs to be resolved for all of these different types of material processing, energy producing devices. He says, what are the consequences of experimenting with, for example, Andrea Rossi reactors, the Vachaya facilities? The Vachaya facility was a recirculating fluid or gas. So for instance, you would take flue gases from a smokestack from, say, a toxic waste burning facility, or it could even be just the smokestack from a hydrocarbon burning reactor, and you would send it round this loop, and in the loop you would have a coil producing a focusing of a magnetic field in the line of the loop, and then you would have some big electrodes that had some pulse discharges. And what this did is it transmuted that material typically into metals, like, I guess, titanium, silicon, iron, these metals that seem to be regularly synthesized from this process. But they're saying that this Vachayev process, and you can go and look at the patents of Vachayev and the replication. Sergey Godin did a replication of the Vachayev waste processing material. And this was also for liquid waste as well, like you had toxic waste and you would pass it through the Vachayev. There would be emissions of this type from Vachayev reactors, and anything similar that did this process using exotic vacuum objects and or the equivalent string vortex solitons, charge clusters, these things which are Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation. He says, with plasma discharges such as that of Anatoly Klimov. So Anatoly Klimov has done these plasmatron experiments, which I shared an image of in Strasbourg, showing both this, like, the wonderful thing about that plasmatron experiment is it is basically the PAP engine in miniature, showing the fact that you're producing charge clusters and then you're detonating those charge clusters, and you produce this pulse that goes through a capillary. So you've got these charge separated materials with the charge clusters in there and their fragments thereof that can recluster and produce the coherent matter waves. But also you get this material that is not moved at all by Mach 2 air jets, right? So that's twice the speed of sound air jet. Okay, this is much, 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 much faster airflow than you ever get in the most strong tornadoes, right? And the thing does not care. And this is what I'm talking about, producing this type of radiation that is impervious to flow of air. The normal means by which you clear the products of radon gas, the products of uranium decay, and to a certain extent thorium decay, although it's a different radon gas. And you clear those and vent those out of risky areas. It does not affect this type of radiation, okay? So, and then he talks about the people that he worked with, and these people, and then he talks about the risks on Bazhetov. Usually Bazhetov's wife said that after 30 years of experiments and working with these types of radiations, he established that you need to protect workers with fluoroplastics. So the fluorine is a high spin material, and that is a good way potentially to do it. And boron. And I previously identified the importance of boron in capturing the energy in the borosilicate glass of our initial work, the first reactor that worked from Francesco Celani, and the fact that the original El Nuovo Cemento reactor of Francesco Piantelli was constructed around a Maycore. This is a machinable ceramic which contains 7.5% of boron oxide, I think, in the ceramic. And so many of these different devices had boron involved, and it's because it's a neutron capture material, and I believe that it's able to capture these neutral clusters and prevent them from moving. But it's not potentially the best way of doing it, because you need ideally to excite them and then capture them. Okay, so this was Shishkin's presentation here, and I'm going to go and show some biological studies. But before that, I want to talk about something that's more positive here. And that is that I felt very blessed about the place that I was born into. I thought it was a very special place. It's called Worthing. I've spoken about it. And when I was looking to move to a different place, I toured around Eastern Europe, and I have to say that I found the Czech Republic and Brno to be a very energetic place. And I decided to choose that place to buy a house and so forth. And then I went to India and I toured all around India looking for a place to invest. And again, similarly, I found, without considering anything at the time, that Kerala was a highly energetic place because I'm electrosensitive, but I felt similar in these places to how I felt in Worthing. And when I go back to Worthing, I really like the feeling there. I like the energy there, and I like the energy in these other two places. And when I was speaking to these two people that want to help move forward with producing this shielding, I said, well, there are places where you can go and you can see the distribution of radon emissions. They're easy to find these things on the internet. And so I went ahead and looked at this. And before I go there, I want to talk about the fact that we know that ionizing radiation, particularly high energy particles and gamma rays and so on, as we've just seen in the Shishkin work, can produce these clusters. And we know, for instance, from the work of Leonid Doroitsky, that these clusters bind to oxygen. And that was what I said I think was happening in the mid-1990s work of Sundaresan on secondment from the Babratomic Research Center and Botchris in Texas A&M University when they did the replication of George Osawa, his carbon arc experiments underwater. They only saw the synthesis of the metal ion when they had dissolved oxygen in the water. And I hypothesize that that is because they need the oxygen to bind the clusters, and the oxygen also is paramagnetic, and so it can take a role in constructing the overall charge clusters that can do the magic of synthesizing the elements. Okay, so above Chernobyl, there was this incredible weird glow observed by thousands and thousands of people in Pripyat, which is the city that kind of like built that whole facility and managed it. And the weird glow was caused in the statements of Leonid Doroitsky because, in his view, these low-shack monopoles, these monopole structures, these charge clusters were binding to the paramagnetic oxygen and changing the orbits of the electrons such that when they were promoted with other ionizing radiation and then decay emitting the photon were not the ordinary photon that you would see from ordinary oxygen being ionized. Okay, and so this particular situation tells you, in my view, that oxygen can do this very special thing. Now, the part of Moravia, this part of Czech Republic that I'm in right now, it's always been special for the fact that, like, there seems to be very tall people, rudely healthy people, strong people, and this has been known for a very, very long time. And the Czechs are very technically brilliant, very intelligent, and perhaps there's something to that, why that would be. Well, if you had, and also Kerala has some of the most well-educated people and intelligent people in India. It's famous for it. And so could there be a connection between the high radiation in Kerala and intelligence, or rather clarity of mind and health? Because actually Kerala has some of the highest life expectancy in India. I think it's like 83 or something, which is ridiculous compared to even many parts of the world in the Western world. It has very, very high life expectancy in Kerala, in this place, which is basically on one of the world's biggest monazite deposits, which is producing a load of radiation, and hence why you get loads of electrical storms. And so I was saying that I think there's a reason, you know, we can find these places where these high radiation are. And so I just did a quick web search, and you'll see what I found. Firstly, we have the background radiation here. We do somewhere. Let me get that up. I'll open another couple of tabs here. So this one. Oh no, I've got it somewhere else here. Bear with me just a second. Sorry for the minor delay here. So, this is the Joint Research Centre, the Radioactive Environmental Monitoring of Europe, right? And can anyone see anything interesting? Can anyone see anything interesting whatsoever? Now, just to let you know that 0 becquerels per meter cubed to 20 becquerels per meter cubed, and each of the boxes on this is a 10 by 10 kilometer average. That is this kind of like purple down here, okay? So if we go to the Netherlands here, where it's all sand and silt and mud, there's almost no radiation whatsoever in the Netherlands, okay? If you go to London here, you can see, again, it's very little radiation there, okay? But does anyone notice anything? Can you see it yet? Not on this iPhone. Sorry, Gordon. UK, very good 3. The Czech Republic is surrounded by mountains here, here, and here, right? It's not surrounded by mountains here. But the Czech Republic is literally marked out as being the heart of Europe, the beating heart of Europe, the incredible high radiation zone of the Czech Republic. Okay? In fact, the single contiguous largest area of 500 to 1,000 becquerels per meter cubed in Europe is here, other than up here in Finland. There's an area here which is not quite as big contiguous, but there's more area. Okay? All right. So the Czech Republic is basically a hotspot. So you can understand why we dug some uranium up and have nuclear reactors here in the Czech Republic. Okay? And the incredible thing is here, in one of the highlands here, this is Brno, where I currently am. In the highlands here, it's one of the areas with the highest radiation area. Okay? 500 to 1,000 becquerels per meter cubed. And so the rains come on here and they percolate through, and this relatively low, so this is here, this is 500 to 1,000. Over here in Brno, it's 100 to 200. So it's very much higher. And the water that you would get to drink here would not necessarily have the radiation coming out of it, but it would potentially be completely alive, full of chi. And I want to go over to here, a famous place in the Czech Republic, an absolutely famous place that the Russians loved to go to before recently. And it is the birthplace of one Martin Fleischmann. And it's called Karlovy Vary. And in Karlovy Vary, which is here, if I don't know whether I can turn it off. Can I turn it off? Can I turn the... Anyway, this is Karlovy Vary here, and in the highlands around Karlovy Vary is the highest area of radiation in the Czech Republic, 1,000 to 2,000 becquerels per meter cubed. Now, you're not in that area. You don't want to be in the area with the high radiation, but you might want to be consuming the water or being exposed to the water that is literally full of life force chi energy. Okay? So what you can also see is that all across northern Italy here, where you have some of the most longest lived adults in the world, you have some of the highest radiation too. Okay? In this area here, some of the highest life expectancy in the world is in this part of northern Italy, where it's coincidentally some of the highest radiation in Europe. Not as high, I mean, there are some higher localized spots, but not as high as the sort of overall average in the Czech Republic. Now, everyone knows about Cornwall in the UK with its high radiation. But if you actually go here to a map of radon in the UK, okay, so this is the UK. We're going to show the radon data here. This is Cornwall. Okay, so you can see this area in Dartmoor where basically no one lives. But there are lots of areas around, for instance, Tintagel, very high area. And this is where King Arthur, you know, and the Sword in the Stone occurred in Tintagel in this kind of area here. This would be a place of great magic. Why? Because there's lots of these strange radiation stuff. Okay, Derbyshire. Let's have a look at Derbyshire. Derbyshire. Where are we, Derbyshire? Oh God, now I'm going to show my ignorance of the UK. Derby. Where's Derby? Derby there. So Derby itself is low radiation, but look at what you've got here in the Derbyshire Dales. Very high. Now, some of the best mineral water in the world comes from these kind of areas, all right? So there's more in the mineral water than the minerals. There is chi. There is chi. Now, here's an interesting thing I did not expect whatsoever when I was looking at this early in the week, and that is, I used to live, this is Worthing, right? I used to live here. Where is it? Let me get to the right thing. There we go. This is Offington Avenue. This is Offington Gardens. I used to live here in a high radiation zone. And this is the Thomas à Becket School, where I understand Martin Fleischmann came to, right? So this is just a short walk. You can see the little houses on here. This was our house here that looked west over when we saw the lights in 1979. And this is Thomas à Becket School, where, as far as I understand it, Martin Fleischmann did some of his schooling. And so this is a high radiation area relative to most of the southeast. You can see it's just this little band down here towards Eastbourne and Brighton. There's also another bank over here in Dover. So I have this weird situation where I wasn't as lucky as Martin Fleischmann. It's probably why he's far more intelligent than me. I wasn't lucky enough to live in Karlovy Vary, this key spa town in the Czech Republic, where he was born, next to the highest background radiation source in the Czech Republic. But I suspect that the water there is extremely good, right? There's a thing called Karlovy Vary International Airport. And if you actually go to Karlovy Vary, as I did a few years ago, it would appear that nearly half of the town was owned by Russians, and they would fly directly from Moscow to Karlovy Vary International Airport to go to the spa. That's how keen they were to go to this spa. And here is this high radiation zone. So I am suggesting that if you are living in a place where there is access to mineral water that comes from a high radiation zone but is not containing the toxic compounds in there. It's filtered mineral water, but the filtration does not remove the chi that gets bound into that. You are able to consume high life force water. The same kind of thing, to a degree, that is synthesized when you have an electric storm, which, by the way, is caused by high static electricity in the environment. But some of that gets imbued into the water that rains, and why rainwater is so much better for growing plants, because it works with their desire to divide, than ordinary tap water. Tap water might be possibly the worst thing you can drink, but here's the thing. Are we at the point of very, very well understanding how it is that you make living water? You oxygenate it and then you charge it. You don't want to be near the charging process, whether you're using corona discharge or you're using cavitation or whatever. You don't want to be near that unless you have decent shielding around the device. But you might want to be drinking the water. And in fact, you're going to see the cavitation device of Shishkin. And like many people that have explored these sciences, he found that when this water was fed to seedlings, or seeds, they germinated faster and they grew with strength and disease resistance. And so I think this is a really interesting kind of confluence and coming together of all of this understanding. So this is the kind of positive interlude that I want to say here, is that don't worry if you are living in a very high radiation zone, or rather proximate to, or proximal to a high radiation zone. It's good if you've got the water, and the water is free from lead and it's free from the toxins, but it is energized by the processes of the earth, okay? Because the evidence is suggesting, with the high life expectancy and no difference in cancer rates in Kerala, and the genius of Martin Fleischmann living near Carlo Viveri, and I'm not saying I'm a genius, but I was born into a high radiation area in the UK, here in Worthing. Specifically, I was in one of the higher... In fact, whilst I was born in this house here, I actually moved into the depths of the higher radiation area here in Findon, and then I eventually moved up to Storrington, which is over here somewhere, Storrington. So I basically lived in the high radiation zone and drank from water sources in that area. And I'm all right, Jack. Thank you very much. Okay, with that said, so don't panic if you're in one of these areas. Do get your confined spaces ventilated, get the air flowing through so you don't be breathing in that radon gas. And the idea is that with this shielding material, you are able to shield against the negative effects of this neutral radiation that can get emitted. Okay, and so I'm going to now go to Shishkin's paper on, or rather the discussion of the patent, and just go and show how he had a couple of examples where they applied for this, or applied this shielding substance and the effects that it had on the participants in this high radon area. So give me just find that. Shielding, I got it here. Okay. Right. Okay, so in the blog it's called O'Day Method of Protection from Strange Radiation. These are the birdies, this is the patent. I translated it all into English. I did a read through so you don't, or I prepared a read through so you don't have to read it if you struggle with that. These are the kind of compounds that they suggest and that we would look to investigate as part of this plan to produce this shielding technology. Okay. So an example of the implementation of the method here. After construction and finishing of the premises for an individual residence of a family of 4 people in a country house, it turned out that the well-being of those living in it had begun to noticeably worsen. There was insomnia, a feeling of heaviness in the body, a feeling of a lack of air, increased fatigue. The geobase of the building site was analysed, and it turned out that under the bedrooms of the inhabitants of the house, there are deep faults in the Earth's crust, which are sources of intense flows of Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation. Okay, so this is where inside the Earth, the MTER is produced and it's coming up through these cracks. To ensure the protection of the inhabitants of the house, the floor and ceiling of the basement floor, which occupies the entire area of the house, was covered with a composition based on strontium aluminate of the following composition here. A week later, after coating this, the well-being of the inhabitants of the house improved significantly. Complaints of insomnia ceased, and the desire to sell the house had disappeared. Right? Example 2. The intensity and characteristics of Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation can be judged from the intensity and characteristics of the craters that appear on photographic emulsions when MTER clusters adhere to them. The protective properties of the paint based on zinc sulfide from Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation emanating from a duralumin plate irradiated with cobalt 60 gamma radiation source at a dose of 50 grays was tested. Luminescent composition by weight, this was coated on the inside of a cardboard box measuring this, coating thickness that. The duralumin plate was irradiated at the Nuclear Research Laboratory of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research at the Rockhurst facility. After irradiation, the plate was checked for the absence of radioactivity. So basically there was no radioactivity coming out of this thing of ordinary types. Then, 2 pairs of photodetectors facing each other with photo emulsion layer and packed in opaque bags were placed on the plate. The first package with a pair of photodetectors were located at a distance of 2 to 3 millimeters from the surface of the duralumin plate. The second package was placed in a box, painted from the inside with a luminescent composition at a distance of 10 millimeters from the plate. Exposure was carried out for 60 minutes with photodetectors shaken every 15 minutes. There were 3 exposures in total. After developing the photodetector films, dark spots in the form of birds were counted, which were taken as a trace from Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation cluster. The total number of birds on the photodetectors outside the box painted inside with zinc sulfide paint, 10 counts. On photodetectors inside the box, 5 counts. Thus, 0.1 millimeter thick layer of fluorescent paint based on zinc sulfide attenuated the MTER flux by a factor of 2. Okay, so you can work out if you want to reduce, that's a factor of 2. So I guess that's what? Yeah, it's half the number of counts, okay, with 0.1 of a millimeter layer. So you can kind of work out how much you would need to very significantly reduce the impact from the clusters. So there's a couple of examples of the use of the paint. Right, now I'm going to talk about 2 studies. One I think that was done in 2010. We'll have a look on maybe earlier. I think it was actually 2006. And then another study that was done in 2014 with sources of Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation and the implications for health thereof. Okay, let's just check this. That's what I wanted to do here. Okay, yes. All right, so. Now this is when we're going to really hit the metal here. In terms of the implications of what we are looking at here. Right. So as usual, I will share all of the links here. So in this case, this is on the Fondation de Broglie. This was work conducted in part by Leonid Goritskev, the claimed discoverer of strange radiation in 2001, although it was drawn in the patent of M. Solin in 1992. So he observed the thing without giving it a name at that time. So assessment of the biological effects of strange radiation, and the lead author here is Priachin, and it was conducted with several major mainstream physics institutes, the Kurchatov Institute in Moscow, the Chelyabinsk State University in Chelyabinsk, Russia, and the Urals Research Center in Chelyabinsk. Results from studies of electrical explosions of foils made from super pure materials in water pointed to the emergence of a new chemical elements, that's transmutation to you and me, and additional findings was that the discharge of strange radiation accompanying transformation of the chemical elements. Identical phenomena were revealed during tests of voltage limiters for breakdown. The intensive research work focusing on the effects of strange radiation and the use of voltage limiters for industrial purposes required that appropriate safety regulations be developed and applied in practice. However, currently the mechanisms involved in the interaction between strange radiation and the substance or a biological entity remains unclear. The two principal questions brought up in connection with the assessment of the biological effects of strange radiation were: is exposure to strange radiation safe for personnel engaged in the studies? This is doing the Relentless research program. Is it safe for us to be doing this? Can biological systems serve as detectors of strange radiation? Therefore, the aim of the research was to investigate the biological effects of strange radiation. So the project task was to estimate the key hematological parameters after exposure of experimental animals to strange radiation resulting from explosion of foils in water or aqueous solutions, and then the study of the genotoxic effects of the strange radiation. So the pilot studies were performed at the RECOM RRC Kurchatov Institute, April-May of 2004. Animals used in the experiment were female mice of this type line, and they're aged 80 days with a body weight of 16 to 18 grams. The animals were exposed to radiation discharge during explosions of titanium foils in water with aqueous solutions. The cages with the animals were placed at 1 meter from the epicenter of the explosion. As can be seen from Table 1, explosions were carried out on the 19th, 3 explosions, 20th, 4 explosions, and 22nd, 3 explosions of April 2004. Explosions and so on. There we go. So they had a number of explosions with the subject animals. The animals were assigned to 4 experimental groups, each of 17 to 20 mice. The animals received experimental exposure within 1, 2, and 3 days of the experiment. In total, the experimental groups were exposed to 3, 7, and 10 explosions respectively. Hematological studies, this is blood studies, in order to identify the basic reactions of the hemopoietic system. The following parameters were estimated using conventional methods: number of nucleated cells in the bone marrow, number of leukocytes in the peripheral blood, cell composition of the bone marrow, the rate of bone marrow erythrocytes at different levels of maturation, polychromatophile, oxyphile, and cell composition of the peripheral blood. Assessment of the biological effects. In the other experiment, the number of CFUs was evaluated after acute whole-body gamma irradiation at dose of 6 grays. So they exposed to these animals to grays of gamma radiation, both before exposure to strange radiation or after exposure to strange radiation. Study of genotoxic effects of strange radiation. Again, all of these papers will be listed in the notes for the blog item. To assess the potential genotoxic effects of strange radiation, the rates of bone marrow polychromatophile erythrocytes with the micronuclei were studied using the bone marrow slides from the hematology experiment. In addition, we studied genotoxic effects of combined exposure to strange radiation, acute gamma radiation at a dose of 2 grays, which was given the next day. Okay, so you can go through the data here. So there was some effects on the nucleation of bone marrow, and they discuss it here and what they did with the control and the active group, and they go into detail here. Then they do an assessment of the biological effects, blah, 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 and they talk about the population of bone marrow stem cells, and you can go and look at this data and so on. I'm not going to go completely into this, but there are some very key conclusions down the bottom, and like I say, you can read this in your own time. Right. The increase in the contents of neutrophils in the peripheral blood can be the result of several reasons. So when you have more neutrophils, the neutrophils, they can go out and kill cancer cells, okay? Anyway, there was an increase in the contents of neutrophils in the peripheral blood, and this can be because of several reasons. An increased bone marrow neutrophil production, which is unlikely in our situation as there was not enough time for the manifestation of such effects. Incoming of neutrophils from the place of deposition, and decrease in neutrophil apoptosis rate, i.e. like dying themselves rate. Okay, so there's ways, but what they observed was higher neutrophils in the peripheral blood. Thus, it can be concluded, based on the results of our experiments, that strange radiation stimulates proliferation of bone marrow cells with or without delay in maturation. So, if you are exposed to strange radiation, it stimulates the proliferation of bone marrow cells. 2. It induces changes resulting in an increased resistance to genotoxic exposures, gamma irradiation and others. So if you had chemicals in your body that were going to lead you to get cancer, or you had maybe radiation in your lungs that might lead you to get cancer, or you might have, in their case, actually irradiating these mice with gamma radiation, that there was resistance, increased resistance to the effects of genotoxic, i.e. things that cause your genes to fall apart and you get cancer. Okay. Strange radiation aggravates the clinical course of acute radiation disease if it is applied after gamma radiation. So, if you have strange radiation before, it can stimulate bone marrow cell production or proliferation and lead to a resistance to getting cancer. But if you have exposure to radiation before getting strange radiation exposure, then it can accelerate the course of any damage that might have been caused by the gamma radiation. Okay? And I do remember David Hudson saying something similar with Ormus. You mustn't take Ormus if you've actually got cancer because it can accelerate the cancer growth. You know, so it's like possibly it's beneficial before, but in my view, Ormus is a method of storing this chi, of these charge clusters, in a particular form, and you know the implications are that this might lead to, I'm not saying it does, but the indications are it might lead to clarity of thought and health benefits, but this is not health advice, okay? But in the case of trying to avoid the deaths of researchers and trying to make safe the opportunities that are made available by understanding, the God little g's toolbox, we need to have shielding that protects us from this radiation and makes the whole systems fail safe so that idiots can be near them and idiots can be operating them. Okay. And it says here, it leads to changes of cell composition in the blood. Conclusions. These studies produce the following conclusions. Strange radiation that results from the explosion of titanium foils in water and other aqueous solutions has the capacity to produce biological effects. Okay, there we go. Biological effect of strange radiation is manifested by an increase in the number of nucleated cells in the bone marrow. Strange radiation leads to an increase in dividing cells in the bone marrow. Okay, increase in dividing cells. So it's like accelerating something that wants to divide. Strange radiation results from 10 explosions carried out within 3 days after exposure to gamma radiation, leads to a decrease in bone marrow repopulation. This is after exposure. It's not good to have after exposure. Okay. Assessment of the rate of micronuclei in bone marrow erythrocytes did not reveal any genotoxic effect of strange radiation. Exposure of mice to strange radiation leads to a 1.5-fold decrease in the genotoxic effect resulting from additional gamma radiation of 2 grays. Such reaction may be described as an adaptive response, right? So whether it's adaptive or it's doing whatever, for some reason there is a decrease 1.5 times. That's a massive change in your likelihood of getting some genotoxic effect from exposure of 2 grays of gamma radiation. Exposure to strange radiation can bring about an increase in the proportion of neutrophils in the peripheral blood of experimental animals. And neutrophils are the thing that if you go to this National Institute of Health document here and you read through it here, it says that hydrogen peroxide production by neutrophils is also considered as one of the mechanisms of eliminating tumor cells. For instance, neutrophils, after physical contact with cancer cells, can secrete hydrogen peroxide, resulting in tumor cell death by calcium 2 plus influx through the TRPM2 calcium 2 plus channel. Okay, that's in this paper here that will be in the reference notes. So if you have an increase throughout the body of neutrophils, then it's not surprising that this leads to a reduction in cancer for those that are exposed after being exposed to a dose of strange radiation. It can be suggested by the results of the test exposures that strange radiation can affect human health. It has been shown by these preliminary studies that to gain more insight into the biological effects of strange radiation, further investigations would be necessary. So in short, when I'm reading this paper, although I may be wrong, and this is not health advice, that the people in Kerala that are exposed to the highest background radiation dose on Earth, natural background radiation, they have their legs firmly as fishermen on the sand. And the part of the body that produces and nucleates bone marrow cells and production of these cancer-killing white blood cells is closest to the source of the strange radiation, and that this is throughout their life. They're not exposed to the radon gas because there's constantly wind blowing there. The wind does not affect the strange radiation. The strange radiation will still continue to go in the direction it wants to go. It is not blown away, as I showed in the single image referring to the work of Anatoly Klimov in the presentation I gave in Strasbourg. And so they will be exposed throughout their lives. And if they constantly got a heightened ability to destroy cancer cells, is it any wonder that they do not get higher rates of cancer, even though they're in this higher background radiation area? And is it any wonder that people in Kerala, potentially, it's only one factor, of course, they live in a very pleasant environment for living. It's typically not far from body temperature and so forth. But is it any wonder that they have such long lives in Kerala? Okay, so that's the first paper that I wanted to talk about tonight. And the second paper is in a similar vein. So just let me get that one up. In fact, I can do that with another piece of work by our good friend here, let me just do this, by Alexander Shishkin. And this actual paper, it actually tells a story. It's quite an important story in my view. So let me just get this here, and I will translate this. I have permission to translate and publish all of Alexander Shishkin's work. I've already done quite a few. If you haven't seen them, I recommend you go and read them. So give me a sec here. Right, so this particular paper is called About the Characteristics of Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation, and that should be MTER, and its biological impact on humans. This paper presents a review of 15 years of the author's research into the characteristics of a new type of penetrating radiation. The author paid special attention to its biological impact, since numerous experimenters, engineers and technical staff working on cold nuclear transmutation programs, plasma and ball lightning studies, right? So anything that has ball lightning in, anything that has plasma, anything that shows cold nuclear transmutations, right? Applied applications of rotation fields, creation and operation of nuclear physics installations, including accelerators, are exposed to the lethal risk of radiation. The author described some of the negative symptoms discovered from exposure to the new type of radiation based on his own experience. The main objective of this article is to involve scientific teams in the study of new fundamental phenomena in order to develop penetrating radiation detectors, penetrating radiation protection, and safety standards. Okay? Very important. So, in 2002, Alexander Shishkin started making a rotary hydrodynamic machine, Photo 1, for synthesizing methanol from natural methane. When I started the rotary hydrodynamic machine on water without methane, I discovered that the installation had a negative effect on my body. So this is pure water cavitation. This is the device. You've got like something like a 4 kilowatt motor, I think, maybe offhand. This is the type of cavitation device. He's got water flowing in and comes out, and he has a device that this is actually when he's actually trying to produce the material. Okay. On March the 10th, 2004, I placed X-ray films with an exposure of 12 minutes near the installation. After developing one of the films, I was surprised to find it generated X-ray radiation with an energy of up to 8 kiloelectron volts. This is the fogging of the film. Morning DIY projects with Chauxis. I'm very happy you could join us here. So, from the point of view of normal physics and my personal experience, this could not have happened. I went online and came across articles by A.F. Kladoff. This is a guy we know well, or we've discussed at length, who described experiments with aqueous solutions on a similar setup, a cavitation device. It turned out that back in the early 90s, Kladoff synthesized methanol. And the surprise was added, since Alexander Fedorovich, this is Alexander Fedorovich Kladoff, registered cold nuclear transmutations and unknown radiation. He explained the cold nuclear transmutation effect by droplet fusion of nuclei in a collapsing cavitation bubble. Okay? In the summer of 2004, I sought advice from some of the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research theoreticians I knew, who referred me to Fangil Akhmatagarievich Gariv. At this second stage, numerous experiments were conducted. An inexplicable mass transfer, tens of grams of metal, was detected inside and outside the hydrodynamic generator. It's just translated that wrong. I'll do a proper translation. This is a rough translation. So I've discussed this recently, and I published a video where he was talking about this in response to the paper published in Nature Scientific Reports by Benjamin Huang and myself. And we've also seen the transfer from the inner, outer of the inner of the thunderstorm generator to the inner of the outer. And this is, in my view, because you get these magnetic north and south structures, and one is pulling in and it's transferring through a wormhole, through a filament to the other one, and it's producing these iron-rich crenellated spheres. So he had a transfer of metal, and in one case, I think it was iron from inside one part of the hydrodynamic generator to another part. Very light, tens of grams, he's saying here. Tens of grams was transferred, okay? And in another part, it was outside of the reactor, and it was from a copper thing to another thing. So this wasn't... He said it's because maybe there's a huge current flow. I'm arguing that it's this magnetic flux tube, and it pulls it into the center of this vortex structure and it sends it through the wormhole and it gets reborn on the other side. Okay, it's basically teleported through a wormhole. But unfortunately, there was neither reproducibility of the results nor clarity in explaining the research results. In April 2010, Fanjul Garib died suddenly after the Joint Institute of Nuclear Research Directorate fired him on January the 1st, 2010 for pseudoscience. I took part in organising his funeral and a memorial seminar on the topic of cold transmutation of nuclei, which he had led for many years. At this seminar, I became acquainted again with Vladimirovich Mikhailovich Dubovik. This is the discoverer of the toroidal moment. So in 2010, Alexander Shishkin started working with Vladimir Mikhailovich Dubovik. Okay, so he was working until his death. He was working with him until his death in February this year, 2024. He proposed to experimentally verify the existence of a shell model of the atom, within the framework of which the nucleus hangs inside a shell of primordial matter on two vortices. Energy from the primordial matter, which consists of ultra-cold neutrinos, enters the nucleus through the suction vortex. I've described this in other paper and I will go into more detail. The primordial matter processed by the nucleus is emitted through the second vortex, creating a vortex shell around the nucleus, which closes in on itself through the suction vortex. The electron does not rotate around the nucleus, but falls on the nucleus due to the Coulomb potential, receives energy from the nucleus and flies to the shell, pushing it to the Bohr radius. After losing energy, the electron falls on the nucleus again. According to Vladimirovich Dubovik, the potential energy of the strained shell exceeds 100 gigaelectron volts. Experiments between 2004 and 2015 here. To test the shell model of the atom, first experiments were conducted on June the 18th and 21st, 2010, which would allow us to answer the following questions. If the shell is hit, for example, by gamma quanta from radioactive source of 60 cobalt, is it possible to knock out the core of the shell? And then, will there be any after effects from such a blow? The experiments were conducted in the calibration room of the Radiation Safety Department of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. This is in Dubna, I think. Yeah. Two identical duralumin cylindrical banks with a diameter of 80 millimeters and a length of 100 millimeters were used for the experiment. 3 X-ray films measuring this size were prepared for each blank. Each film was placed in the package and made of blank opaque paper. This is, I think, the study it was talking about earlier that is in the patent for the shielding of the device. Or it's from this that they developed the second example that I gave in the patent just now. Okay. Control samples were located outside of the zone of scattered radiation. The co-limited closure was controls using X-ray meter. The radiation dose was reduced by 10 times to 0.1 millisieverts. Okay, so yes, this looks like the thing. Photo 9 to photo 14 show the results of the experiment. I did not receive any answers to the questions I asked. However, the following patterns were noted. All the photos show round spots. Well, we saw this in the lion from Neil Crichton Gold on X-ray film. Some of them double. We saw that too. And the double spots often lined up in a straight line. Some photos showed traces of bifurcation of trajectories. Photo 4 and 13. These characteristic traces in the form of round spots are recorded only on films placed in paper bags. So they found a whole bunch of strange radiation caused by this gamma radiation exposed duralumin sheets. So we can actually create a source of strange radiation by using duralumin and 60 cobalt. So when we are doing the research into developing shielding technologies, we already have described here how we can create strange radiation source. Okay. Traces in the form of round spots are absent in polyethylene bags. Traces of the so-called strange radiation are registered in them. It has been experimentally verified that films with no gap between the thick light insulating surface and the film, there are no traces of spots and or strange radiation. Okay, blah, blah, blah. So here's are the spots, not so spectacular. Here are, you can see these dual spots here. There's a dual spot there, there's a dual spot there, there's a dual spot here, these are dual spots here. These are exactly and precisely the same kind of structures we observed in the X-ray film that was exposed to the cold reactor by Neil Crichton Gold, Acker Lion 1. Okay, and this is what I identified. I had no idea about this research, and here we are seeing the same observation. Okay, so there's all these different spots. These are close proximity dual spots here, and I think he does a zoom into some of these later on. Okay, so he's got these two spots are quite close, and he's got some close-ups here. Blacking in the form of round spots, X-ray film load. Okay, so anyway, these are the birdies we saw earlier. These are some traces. These are the zoomed in traces. So here's a trace, but here's the squiggly line, and we know probably what are forming these. We've got these two things orbiting around each other, or they're bouncing like that or stuff. We've seen this in beautiful extreme detail in the aftermath of the Binge-Wen-Huang reactor analysis. This is trace of a protector, 15 micrometer thick on the surface of a photo detector near bismuth body of revolution. So this is caused by spinning bismuth body. In our 2010 research financed by the closed joint stock company NTK, the results of the experiments are described in this particular document. The shell model of the atom made it possible to explain numerous traces on photographic films, including traces of strange radiation. If the shell of an atom is hit, then with a high degree of probability, one of the vortices can break away from the nucleus. In this case, the nucleus falls out of the shell and the shell closes in on itself, forming a vortex soliton. To conserve the angular momentum, the shell flies away from the nucleus at the speed of sound in the opposite direction in the form of a string. Now, this is very interesting that he should say at the speed of sound, because in the 1992 patent of M. Solin, he says that these tracks, which look pretty darn like this in M. Solin's patent, looks very much like this, are caused by a sound wave. Okay, so you have a coming together from this 2010 work of both the observation and also the claims of the 1992 patent of the coherent matter reactor from M. Solin. They talk about the characteristics here, which I've detailed in the past. Now, the properties of such clusters are described in these works. Now it gets really interesting here. MTER has a high penetrating ability and in high concentrations behaves like radiation, Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation. Clusters have the ability to absorb electrons and ions without exhibiting a total charge. We called such structures energy clusters. Okay, so they're saying that they can capture electrons, they can capture ions without expressing the charge that the ions have or that the electrons have. Very much like Ken Scholder's work, right? Energy clusters create traces of so-called strange radiation on the surface of photoemulsions. A bird and/or umbrella, explosive unpacking of the cluster with the release of a large number of electrons, including accelerated ones. Curved track, trace of a cluster crawling along the surface of the film. Trace of the protector, he calls it. Also a trace of an energy cluster crawling along the surface of the film, but with mechanical penetration into the body of the film. Now read this. Traces of round spots, photos 3 to photo 16, are associated with the fact that the energy cluster, when interacting with the paper fibers, begins to crumble into smaller vortices, which, when losing energy, leave traces of round spots. So you can imagine a large vortex, toroidal vortex, and that breaks up into, oh, hold on a minute, smaller vortices. Now, if there are those that have not seen my presentation, which I will publish when I've finished doing all of the links for it, but for those that didn't see it, my Strasbourg presentation, we know you are going to see in the work of Matsumoto this. This is in his book, but you could never see it with this level of detail. It is this. Rings made of rings. Now, because of the way that he's focusing through the nuclear emulsion, you don't quite see the overall structure. Now, in between black hole images and cold fusion star images, I came across what I thought was the thing that he was trying to indicate to my translator show was the thing that, whilst he was alive, he said Bob Greenyer will find some very interesting things in the materials when he looks at them. So what am I referring to? This is a cold fusion star. We saw these kind of cold fusion stars in the breakup of the energy clusters stored in Suhas-Rao-Carr's cavitated material. In this particular image, this is a toroidal cluster, and he says traces caused by a ring explosion. So a toroidal cluster is broken up, and you have a thing coming off here, and you get three things coming off here, and then one of those breaks up, and you get two things coming here, twisting around each other. Okay, and this looks a hell of a lot like these things coming out of a blowing up structure here. Okay, it looks a hell of a lot like these three things, and this frozen structure. But that isn't what I showed in Strasbourg. It wasn't these structures. It was this. This has never been published before, but I published it in Strasbourg for the first time, having found it just a few days before, inspired by what Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto told my translator, which he passed on to me, and that is this. These are tori made of tori. Here is another one, never published before, but in the films observed on the nuclear emulsions. This is a tori made of tori, and the tori is subdivided. And I'm totally blown away by this. Boom! As far as I can work out, this torus has 48 divisions. And it has multiple divisions in the substructure. This was recorded in a nuclear emulsion from a standard cold fusion experiment in 1991-2 period. So I presented this to people at the conference. I asked them in the room, one of my first questions was, does anyone in this room, so can anyone say in this room that they consider themselves an expert in radiographic emulsions, nuclear emulsions? And there was dead silence. I said, is there any individuals in your organizations that you can say you would consider they were experts in nuclear emulsions? Dead silence in the room. What we have shown is that every single thing of key significance that we have observed from cavitation reactions, from Binge-Ren-Huang's reactions, from the Vega experiments, from the work of Neil Crichton Gold with the Lion experiments, from the Suhas-Rao-Carr, all these different systems, and others that I've not just mentioned there, hidden in the work of Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto, there were these various traces. We are now able to resolve them for the first time, in which case they are unequivocal. But this, beyond all imagining, was delivered. A wheel within a wheel within a wheel with the maximum 48 divisions we have never found before. So look out for the Kickstarter for the Dr. Matsumoto books, and we'll have a target to produce the color and really good quality images. I mean, some of the images that are in the current book where you don't even know what you're looking at, it's just a load of black things. We've got beautiful clarity. It's going to be beautiful. And some of them are color. And so that will be in a reflowable, remastered, rewritten with all the and corrected English book as a downloadable document that you can reflow in whatever device you're reading it in. And then we will look to create a hardbound book with print resolution rather than screen resolution images of things like this, in addition to the book, which will also be print resolution. And then Kickstarter extension goals to hopefully build out the website of the most complete record of a scientific discovery, in my view, in history. Okay, so look out also for the final edit of my Strasbourg presentation with all of the references in the coming week. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to go back to this paper because, again, in this work, we can see that he's saying traces of round spots are associated. So we've just looked at a load of round spots from Takaaki Matsumoto. We just looked at that. We looked at these round spots up here. Let's just have a look at that again. And interestingly, where's that gone? Show me again. Let's try again. Okay, these round spots. You can see over here, this one's broken, and actually this is the same as this one, but we're looking at using the microscope at different depths. Okay, so this one looks like one of the substructures is broken out and it's come out here. So this is already a breakdown. But these images are actually in the book, but you cannot see that this is the structure with a hole in it, and this has actually got a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is a hexagon in the middle of this structure. Okay, you can't see this level of detail. And you can't see that this is wheels within wheels within wheels in this structure and within this structure. Okay. Again, this one is breaking down here, and you've got some, overall breakdown of the product. Okay, but they are round spots, and somehow Shishkin and his team at the Joint Nuclear Research Institute at Dubna, they worked out that these round spots are caused by this toroidal vortex of relic neutrinos, which can carry electrons and ions, crumble into smaller vortices. Then number 4 here, energy clusters settle on luminescent centers, which leads to a decrease in the brightness of the luminescence of the phosphors. When mechanical and or electrical impact is applied to the electron clusters, the cluster unpacks and explodes with the emission of accelerated up to 6 kiloelectron volt to 8 kiloelectron volt radiation. This explains the appearance of X radiation near cavitators and cavitating jets of liquid. This explains X-ray radiation near cavitators and cavitating jets of liquid. Right. It also explains this Suhas-Ralkar's fuel, because we know it has energy clusters in there. Some of that was over a period of months automatically decaying, causing what I showed you in my first strained radiation observations in 2017, as recorded here and shown to you just a few minutes ago when I get it to play. The same as Matsumoto's cold fusion stars here, but in the case of Suhas-Ralkar. And this was supposedly activated fuel. This was sonicated for around about 200 hours. This would then go into his reactor and be excited by spark discharges, plasma discharges. And what Shishkin is saying here is that by doing an electrical impact, you will cause the cluster to unpack, releasing high energy, accelerator levels of energy of the matter coming out. Energy clusters are attached to the surface of dust particles. Therefore, with a high concentration of clusters, large destructive explosions of dust, methane and fuel vapors are possible. In coal open casts at great depths, more than 500 meters, electron clusters, energy clusters generated in the depths of the Earth are capable of accumulating in microcracks of the coal seam. When the seam is unloaded, the cracks begin to increase in size, which leads to chain reaction of energy clusters explosion with explosive synthesis and subsequent destructive explosion of methane. Energy clusters are capable of accumulating on the surface of detectors, in particular neutron, alpha particle and gamma quanta detectors. With a high concentration of energy clusters on the surface and their explosion, neutron, alpha particle and gamma quanta detectors register a short several millisecond increase in the count rate, which researchers erroneously interpret as flash of neutrons, alpha particles and gamma quanta. These are the fake neutrons. These are the fake gamma that we thought we were seeing, in my view, in the 2013 December gamma event, and they were the fake photons that we were observing in the signal in the nickel hydrogen sort of Parkhomov-Rossi GS 5.2 mashup in 2015. Okay, energy clusters detonating. Photos 20 and 21 show abnormal current pulses on a, okay, so this is how he does the neutron, fake neutron detectors. 9. A high concentration of the energy clusters leads to computers freezing, which is what we had in GS 5.2. Failure of electronic components, very common, and circuits due to explosions on the surface of the EC. This is on the energy clusters exploding on the semiconductor and the components. And accidents in electrical networks. Energy clusters is contained in blood vessels, listen to this, and capillaries of all living beings and plants. Energy clusters are contained in the blood vessels and capillaries of all living beings and plants. In my presentation in the advanced energy systems in Brno, I said that if you put things into a microwave or you get exposed to a microwave, like the microwaves coming from your 2.45G Wi-Fi connection on your phone, it can cause triggering of the explosion of these clusters, in my view. It produces dead food, it produces dead water, and it damages the life force in your body. In the body of mammals, birds, reptiles and fish, in addition to blood flow and lymph flow, there is energy flow. That is, charge clusters bound into oxygen that may also be bound into hemoglobin, causing energy flow. Energy clusters supplies the body's cells with clean energy in the form of electrons. Energy clusters supplies the body's cells with clean energy in the form of electrons. This is why when you go into Guy Obolinski's plasmatron, I think it's called plasmatron, but that's, I don't want to confuse that with Anatoly Klima's work. But this is the thing that Malcolm Bendall claims he was infused with plasmoids. He was infused with plasmoids, right? And then potentially he got his insights. This is currently being re-engineered and built by Paul Harris in Canada, and I have agreed to subject myself to this system and record for you my subjections to this system. But apparently you can get so charged with plasma that you can literally do like cat's cradle, and the plasmas, you can manipulate the plasma between your hands inside the device. This will charge the body with vast quantities of energy clusters, and those will go into your body, and in theory they will provide your body with clean energy in the form of electrons. Therefore, water with an increased concentration of energy clusters has high healing properties. Therefore, water with an increased concentration of energy clusters has high healing properties. It is expected that cavitation water will produce water that has high levels of energy clusters. Shishkin applied this water to seeds, they germinated, and they produced strong, fast-growing seeds that were resistant to disease. I would like to conduct a study with the water that comes out of Binjuan Huang's cavitation reactors. I know I drank some in his lab. The water looks weird. It is blue in color, the same kind of blue that came out of the cavitation device of Griggs. So it's a bit weird. And I think, is it Schaefer or something, a similar device? In this case, I think a study needs to be done with seed germination. And I might do a study when I visit Binjuan Huang in December. I would like to do a mung bean study with some of the water, or get some of the water and carry it with me and do a mung bean study with that and see what we can see. Anyway, very clearly, energy clusters supplies the body cells with clean energy in the form of electrons. Therefore, water with increased concentration of energy clusters has high healing properties. So there are risks and opportunities here. Risks and opportunities. The energy ocean of charged clusters behaves like a thick gel, so it is assumed that the biological effects of the fourth state of water, discovered by Gerald Pollack, is associated with energy clusters. Energy clusters with accumulated electrons, as a rule, accumulate at the boundary of media. Energy clusters with accumulated electrons, as a rule, accumulate at the boundary of media. Now, I am saying that when you have water and you have a hydrophilic substance like a metal, like aluminium foil, you end up by producing easy water, the fourth state of water, in which you get energy clusters accumulating at the boundary. And when that goes into a vortex and a counter vortex in the ring soliton that's produced at the nodes, that produces toroidal moments, and that is what is going on in the ultra experiment that leads to transmutation so easily in that very simple child level of competence experiment. So therefore, boundary water is water with a high concentration of energy clusters. When a photon interacts with the cluster, the latter easily gives up an electron. Therefore, the explanation for the appearance of current between the boundary and bulk water when irradiated with infrared radiation is quite understandable. A separate topic is the biological impact of phantoms from the energy clusters. So an energy cluster can have an electromagnetic phantom, which is the toroidal cluster of relic neutrinos. In 1989, A.F. Ochtrin published an article on microclusters and ultralight particles. The author discovered that bodies of revolution involve certain microclusters in motion, creating a rotating phantom. This is torsion fields, apparently in the form of a vortex funnel. After the body of revolution stopped, this phantom continued to live for at least 20 days. Now, this is the first time I've seen it in text. Like I say, I will do the proper translation and a read through, and it will be available on my blog of this article. But he mentioned this, not in a presentation, but when I was in the room and I listened to it when I was in Sochi in 2018. And this shows that you can produce very persistent torsion fields when you have a fast-moving, rotating body in an environment. I assume that the phantom is created from energy clusters, okay? These are pervasive energy clusters that are already in the environment. When an organism enters the field of such a phantom, the energy clusters of the energy flow, that's the flow in the body. So you've got a natural flow through your body that your body is manipulating. But when you go into a torsion field, the energy flow are literally, your energy clusters in your energy flow are literally torn out of the organism by the moving clusters of the phantom. Okay? So this is the same risk that I have been warning about over and over again, which the guy that is working with Alexander Shishkin, when he is writing this particular reference here, 13.1, okay, he's talking about how these fractal toroidal structures can rip the chi. What is the chi? The chi is these energy clusters. The chi is in your body. And so these torsion fields that have a cone and they have a focus, they can pull that chi out of your body. So he's saying they're literally torn out of the organism. That is a plant, that is an animal, that is a human, by the moving clusters of the phantom. The part of the organism damaged by the phantom rapidly loses immunity with all the ensuing consequences. So your ability to fight disease is damaged. Now, this is not medical advice. This is a hypothesis based on observation. I happen to agree with the hypothesis. It fits a lot of observations I've had, some exposures that I've had to experiments, how I felt before and afterwards, and so forth. I support this hypothesis from my own anecdotal evidence, but I'm not saying it's fact. But anyway, we have to consider this when we are doing Relentless and we want to be resilient. The part of the organism damaged by the phantom rapidly loses immunity with all the ensuing consequences. I experienced the negative impact of the phantom from the hydrodynamic machine in the summer of 2018. 13.2, a phantom of energy clusters is formed around any body. That is a person. The longer the body is in one place, the more stable the phantom. A seriously ill person creates a stable phantom with all its ailments. Therefore, in hospitals, it is necessary to periodically destroy such phantoms, for example, with the help of an electric spark dischargers. This is what he said to destroy torsion fields when I was with him in Sochi in 2018. Alexander Shishkin said, if you want to destroy torsion fields, the only practical means to do so is by high tension unidirectional electrical discharges. Disruptive discharges. Okay? This breaks up the order of the relic neutrino phantom. It creates disorder. And how this prevents the self-organized relic neutrinos from pulling chi out of living organisms. And he's saying that living organisms, because of the energy flow in them, can end up creating, if they don't move, if they stay in the same position, they can end up creating their own torsion field around them. Okay? The conclusions on the characteristics of energy clusters are confirmed by the discovery of the US experimentalist physicist Ken Shoulders, who in the late 80s and early 90s of the last century filed 5 US patents for the technology of forming high-density charge clusters. In his opinion, these charge clusters are not plasma. They are not plasma. They claim to be a special state of matter called by Ken Shoulders electron validium, which can be translated as strong in unity. In experiments with pulsed high-voltage generators on his simplest devices, Ken Shoulders achieved stable production of charge clusters. They carefully studied their behavior, calculated specific parameters of the charge clusters, outlined a number of areas of application, and most importantly, established that during the existence of a charge cluster, it releases much more energy than is spent on its generation. It releases much more energy than is spent on its generation. In particular, Shoulders established, and we know these figures here. So, In 2014, at the Federal State Budgetary Scientific Institute of the Research Institute of the Occupational Medicine, on the initiative of the author, this is Alexander Shishkin, and with the decisive support of the Russian Academy of Sciences, the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, an experiment was conducted on the effects of string vortex solitons and Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation on biological objects. The goal of this preliminary stage was to study the clinical condition, blood symptom and pathomorphological indicators in laboratory animals exposed to acute single exposure to string vortex solitons and Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation. A corona streamer discharge generator, so this would be something like a plasma ball, with a power consumption of no more than 500 watts, was used as a source of string vortex solitons and Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation. Photo 22. Below are excerpts of the report. 16 white male rats of 200 grams, so they moved on to rats now, we've gone beyond the mice and we're now on rats, were used in the laboratory tests. The animals were divided into one main experimental and one control group of 8 animals each. The duration of the period of exposure to biological objects was 2 hours and 30 minutes. Since the animals were not fed before the experiment, after the end of the exposure, the rats were given water for 30 minutes to exclude the effect of water deprivation on blood viscosity and hematological parameters. Pathomorphological studies of rats were carried out immediately after laboratory tests using generally accepted methods in order to assess macroscopic changes in the internal organs due to the influence of the studied factor. Euthanasia of rats was performed by the decerebration method, that's like removing the brain, dissection of the cervical vertebrae without damaging the integrity of the trachea. After the death of the biological objects, an autopsy of the abdominal cavity and chest was performed. The abdominal organs were examined, and then the lung preparation was removed. The presence of pathological changes, hemorrhages, emphysema, etc., was determined on the pleural surface of the lungs by inspection. This is a ridiculously serious study funded by the Research Institute of Occupational Medicine and supported by no less than the Russian Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Defense for the Russian Federation. This is not chicken feed levels of experimentation. Okay? Very, very serious research conducted by very, very serious researchers. As a result of the pathological studies of the group of rats exposed to the study factor, an increase in the time of cardiac automatism, that is like I think the heart keeps going. Oh God, I didn't want to do that. Up to 10 minutes after euthanasia. So maybe the heart is still working up to 10 minutes after euthanasia was revealed in comparison with animals of the control group. The automatism of myocardial work was registered not only in exsanguinated corpses of the experimental animals, but also in the extracted, separated from the body heart-lung preparations of the same rats. In addition, an increase in the time of intestinal peristalsis. So intestinal peristalsis is where the intestine is squeezing, and that's how it moves the feces along the intestine. So what they're saying is when you're exposed to this radiation, the heart is still working even after death, and the intestine is still working even after death, right? Active movement of loop segments was found in a number of the biological objects of the main group. I mean, it's practically living dead. Absolutely incredible findings. Here's our rats being subjected to the corona discharge, held in their holders, I guess you might call it. So, irradiation, it says, of rats with corona streamer discharge generator. During sectional studies of animals in the control group, no significant differences from the norm were found. Myocardial automatism either persisted for several seconds or was not registered at all. So basically, the control group, which was not exposed to the corona discharged, and you know when I'm reading this, keep thinking Bram Stokes and, you know, not Bram Stokes, but I keep thinking of, you know, reanimating life and like with lightning bolts. And of course, you do kind of like get a heart going by a high tension discharge, don't you? So, but this is just spooky. Like the control subjects had basically no myocardial or automatism, other than for a few seconds, and it was not registered at all. Intestinal automatism was not visually registered even once. So for some reason, yeah, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley. Thank you, Martin. It's alive, says Corky. Right. So a visual comparison of test tubes with the blood of experimental animals made it possible to establish that the blood samples of rats exposed to the factor were bright red and not dark like those of the control group. Such colour changes are characteristic, in particular, of oxygenation. Increase in partial oxygen tension of blood after its passage through the pulmonary circulation and saturation of erythrocytes with oxygen molecules, so red blood cells of oxygen molecules in the pulmonary alveoli. So essentially what they're saying is once you're exposed to this radiation, either your red blood cells aren't able to give up their oxygen so much, or your hemoglobin is able to capture much more oxygen. Or could it be that the oxygen itself is charged and becomes more paramagnetic or more energetic, and it can give more to the body? Is this the Wim Hof method? Are you energizing your oxygen to be supersaturated with energy clusters in such a way that then you can give your body energy and supply your mitochondria with what it needs to produce the heat within the body? Could this be a complete explanation of the Wim Hof method? I don't know. Maybe. By imbuing more energy clusters. Could this be how free divers are able to dive so effectively? Because they are not necessarily getting more oxygen into their body, they're getting more of what the body actually needs to function. Erythrocytes with oxygen molecules in the pulmonary alveoli. However, other causes of colour changes in hematological samples are possible, which differ from the traditional ones accepted in normal physiology. In addition, in experimental rats from the main group, hemorrhages were detected in the lung tissue in 25% of cases. So they had hemorrhages in the lung tissue. Not good. Not good. Constituting 20% of the pleural surface of the lung. Not good, right? So, yes, maybe we want the energy clusters in our body. Do we want to be directly exposed to a source of strange radiation in order to do that? Maybe not, maybe not. So getting this water of life, this aqua vitae, by proxy may be a good thing. Getting it from the water source, from a high radiation background source, might be a good thing. But directly getting high radiation dose of this type of thing, maybe not so good. The described symptoms are typical for high doses of radiation. The organism of the experimental rats was exposed to string vortex soliton radiation. Therefore, hemorrhages were found in the lung tissue. At the same time, the organism of the irradiated rats was saturated with energy clusters. Therefore, the internal organisms received energy from energy clusters, which led to an increase in the time of cardiac automatism. So, maybe not good to stand in a stream of discharge, but maybe good to get water, expose it to that, and then drink it. Not medical advice, based on scientific exploration, not giving medical advice. Up to 10 minutes after euthanasia. So an increase of the cardiac working by itself for up to 10 minutes after euthanasia, compared to the animals of the control group. The automatism of the myocardium was recorded not only in the extinguished corpses of the experimental animals, but also in the extracted blah, blah, blah. We saw this before. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So here's the blood. So photo 23, comparison of blood of rats in the control group, and that is sample 2 here on the left, and irradiated. So the irradiated blood is much, much redder. Much, much redder, okay? Conclusions. Experimenters, engineers, and technical personnel working on cold nuclear transmutation programs. That is anyone that's going to be involved with this process of Relentless. Plasma, goes without saying. Ball lightning studies, goes without saying. Going to be part of this Relentless program. Applied applications of rotational fields and the creation and operation of nuclear physics installations, including accelerators, are exposed to the mortal risk of this type of radiation. It is necessary to involve scientific teams in the study of this new fundamental phenomena as quickly as possible, with the aim of developing detectors for this radiation, protection against this radiation, and safety standards. To study the mechanisms and development of the identified biological effects, as well as to establish the hygienic significance, further targeted, multifaceted studies are necessary using several types of laboratory animals and a wider range of experimental methods, as well as correct dosimetry of physical factors and chemical substances generated during the electrical corona discharges. So, that is, I think, a critical document that we need to take on board when we are looking at the risks and the benefits that can come out of understanding O, what O is, and the need for us to shield and have shielding technology for it when we are doing large-scale development with what it can potentially deliver. I just want to see if there's any other things that I wanted to talk about today, and then I will take your questions. I will reiterate my comments for the trailer for today. The time for hesitancy is over. It will become abundantly clear in the coming weeks that there is a strong will in the community to deliver the promise of the God's toolbox, little g. One aspect of ensuring that the relentless research is conducted safely, so important, and the making of minimum viable products can be enabled with confidence, is knowing that we are doing our best to prevent any potential harm from emissions of Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation or natural exotic vacuum objects or strange radiation, these kind of things. We live in a world where static electricity exists. We grow up where there's these risks of lightning bolts and whatever. These are natural things that people are exposed to. The people in Kerala, as I started out, are exposed to the highest background radiation on Earth. They are rudely healthy, they have some of the longest life expectancy on Earth, and they have no higher incident rates of cancers than the ordinary population. Why? I think the same reasons that I think we can, when we understand this technology, we can enhance the lives of people that do not have blood cancers. We can enhance the ability of them to prevent them getting, or potentially assist in, this is not medical advice, potentially assist in treating other types of cancer in the body by stimulating the production of cancer-killing cells in the body that can go, and I've talked about this many times, but I've really walked you through the process tonight. But we want the benefits of this. We don't want the material harm. We don't want that material harm because we don't want to be shut down because regulations are introduced because this is so disruptive. We need to allow the disruption to improve the human condition, improve the state of the planet, and basically take us to another level. Okay, so with that, I'm going to see what comments you have. So Carmen Miller says, they may like to suppress that more than free energy. Well, I'm sorry, the veil is being lifted. In my view, the understanding of what drives kind of life force and the risks because like, if anything wants to divide, a disease wants to divide, a pathogen wants to divide. Like when you understand how to slow down something and accelerate something else, then this is the way the information is getting out there, and it's not coming from woo woo. It's coming from actual study. Yeah, Carmen, she says that this is a profound presentation today. This is probably the most important presentation that I've ever given in terms of the significance for human health. Massive, massive, massive opportunity to improve human health. Understanding that the same thing can also harm human health if used wrongly. And without understanding direct application and proxy application. Right? This energy flow through the body is very, very important. Thank you very much, Lion Hutter. That's very kind of you. So, G the Skater says, I was wondering if you could point us to the resources for learning about coherent matter waves, Mr. Green. I am going to walk you through one of the earliest papers in maybe I can do it next Sunday in the next live stream, of one of the most important papers in my understanding of how coherent matter waves came to pass in modern understanding. It's from 1984. I've mentioned the guy before. The paper was published in 1984. The patent was published in 1986. It predates a similar proposal in 2001 to the linear collider group by Dr. Takaaki Matsumoto for producing something similar. And obviously it vastly predates the systems and methods for creating coherent matter waves by Lockheed Martin. But you will see the massive commonality between the concepts involved, and you will understand that these things, I mean, you have to put in context that the idea of producing coherent matter beams in 1986 is long before a Bose-Einstein condensate had supposedly even been made. Yet when you hear what was done to do that, you will understand why it may have been fairly reasonable and obvious for the Solin patent to work in 1992. So these things are not without precedent, and it takes real research bodies focusing on actual published data to have been able to pick these nuggets out and realizing their significance and actually delivered on them. And I think that's going to become very clear. So Daz says, hey Bob, did you ever drink from the natural spring by the hole in the wall at Houghton, just down the road from Storrington? Yeah, I think I did. Quite a bit. Yes, I think I did. So Odd1X says, is a coherent matter beam the same thing as what Tesla called ether stream? Well, an ether stream probably is a coherent matter beam, but it's a coherent matter beam, in my view, of Magneto Toro Electrical Radiation. And if you get these things quantum locked into space, because they suck chi through them, and they're themselves made of chi, they can persist as like current fibers in the air that can persist in pushing the chi through them, even though they're not necessarily moving themselves. So I think that Tesla observed that these flux lines could be set up, and then they continued to produce a flow of energy for an extended period of time. So yes, they are a form of coherent matter. But specifically, the cause ions and not the electrons of the atoms, but this secondary fractal tori of relic neutrinos that essentially, if you read this work by Shishkin, which is derived from his work with many of the top scientists in Russia, working at the top institutions, funded by the top people to fund anything, considering these things, working with Vladimirovich Dubovik, the discoverer of the toroidal moment, you can understand that even that discussion about the decaying of these toroidal clusters into smaller solitons, leaving a round spot, you can understand that they were seeing this as the fractal tors without actually spelling it out, and that in that case Tesla was bang on the money when he was producing these current streams, and they were neutral. You could probably move your body through these current streams and they would still persist. Thank you very much, Matthew Reynolds. That's very kind of you. Defund the BBC and put the MFE plea in its place. That's a bit of a responsibility, but... So Venom K says, so for now, water from Ultra Experiment is a poor man's version of good EV water. Well, maybe. Certainly, I would expect... The whole point of the last experiments that I did with the mass spectrometer was to show that aluminium was so good at doing this process, because aluminium, when you have ultrasound, you break off the oxide layer and it produces aluminium oxide, and in the process of stripping the oxygen from the water, it produces atomic hydrogen and protons, because it must, because there's heterogeneous splitting of the water, and those are the things that are going into the toroidal moment, because paramagnetic, that both protons and atomic hydrogen are paramagnetic, whereas H2 is not, right? And it's exactly produced at exactly the point that it can go into the structures. So I believe that and this is my finding and my hypothesis, and I believe we proved it earlier in the year, of why aluminium is so good. And there's almost nothing better for demonstrating this process. Now, I have suggested to Benjuan Huang in the middle of the year, and I've made this public also, the use of proton exchange membranes. Typically, you can buy these from eBay in hydrogen drinking water, and they exclude the oxygen from the proton exchange membrane, so you get hydrogen water. I would just put the proton exchange membrane in there, into the water flow, and I suggested this to introduce oxygen into the water and also atomic hydrogen and protons into the water, with the water flow going around it. And the reason I suggested that is because of all the things that I've discussed about the importance of having oxygen there to make, you know, a Mars gas, and binding the clusters to the oxygen, the paramagnetic oxygen being dissolved in the water, and so on. But also for this fact, which I've also discussed before, the hydrowave device, which verified Kladov's transmutation and remediation, the hydrowave device, which I talked about in 2006 and 2009, after they ran out of biological and chemical weapons to destroy, they tested the remediation of strontium-90 and yttrium-90. This is a beta isotope, and they verified what Kladov claimed. In that device, as part of the system, they have a similar thing that's in the Vachayev device, which is an electric arc discharge. And what do you produce in an electric arc discharge? You produce charge clusters and split water. Various hydrogen, protons, atomic hydrogen, oxygen, ozone, whatever. And that is in the water flow that then goes into the cavitation device. And so they have a hard way of introducing the paramagnetic components that, in my view, are very important in the cavitation process to allow for accelerated decay or accelerated synthesis of materials. Okay, I've suggested to do this in a solid state way where you can control the voltage and you can have a whole number of proton exchange membranes from these commercially available hydrogen devices to accelerate the process in the Binge-Wen-Huang reactors to improve the effectiveness of the toroidal clusters in there in order to improve the rate of transmutation, ideally within the stream of the water flow. So digital gifted, I would very much love to have your experience on the live consultation session on Friday this week. He's just said a lot of DAOs imploded in 2022 to 2023, so learning from their failures will be important. Yes, we want to make it resilient. So learning from failures of DAO is critically important. I don't know a better way that's currently available for an international, headless, democratic, genuinely democratic organization that people can get involved with to create these minimum viable products that is resistant to manipulation by governments and stuff. But all of that is vulnerable if we don't solve the strange radiation thing. So that's why I'm hoping that these people from Italy and Switzerland are good to their word, and we can build an organization that is able to produce the screening technologies, do some more research. It would be lovely to be able to do research of the caliber of this conducted by top research institutes. I'm not suggesting we do animal studies. There is another study where they looked at the effect on seeds with different types of shielding and stuff, and maybe I can go into that at another time. But I think the main points that can be learnt about the opportunities and risk I've gone through tonight. So so Corky says, I'm already a Taoist. Very good, I like it. So Ken Pratt says, do I understand then that streamer discharges into, above, around, through water cause the changes in the water? I think if you put water next to a streamer discharge, it's going to charge that water, yes. Yes, the open sourcing comes with the territory of how we envisage conducting Relentless. And Brandon B says, holy water comes from the radiated grottos. I have no doubt. So is strange radiation just another word for ether? Strange radiation, if you actually look at, where is it, up here, the formation of Magneto Toro Electrical Clusters, you can see that strange radiation is made of what they call microleptons, which would be, you know, at some point you've got to say, look, this is enough for us to know you're actually to work with. You don't necessarily have to have the smallest thing conceivably imaginable to work with. You know, if I want to wipe a window, I use a dishcloth. I don't use one of the fibers and try and wipe the whole window, do I? So if you come down here somewhere, they go into the structures of these things. So is it in here? No, this is talking about the depth. He's talking about that. Maybe it's in the other. Okay, so here. Each cluster contains 10 to the 8 to 10 to the 11 electrons and 10 to the 3 and 10 to the 5 ions. So this is Ken Shoulder's charge clusters. Okay. But, okay, so it isn't in this paper, but in other papers that I've translated, it shows the incredible level of substructures that are in these things. But essentially, they are self-similar structures. So try to cheaters, very good. Never win. Got to cruise. Catch the rest later. Thank you, Brandon B. Okay, I'm going to crash soon as well. It's 1:24 here. I've been going quite a while. Okay. So I think probably if you've got questions, please ask me in the blog and or on this video replay, and I will try to answer them. But in short, this was Ode Relentless, enabling Relentless rather, shielding opportunity. So we have massive opportunities made available to us from understanding O and what it is, and we must shield those opportunities from attack by being resilient. And one of the big areas that we can be potentially compromised is that if we are relentlessly pursuing this and there is a radiation risk that can be regulated for, we can have a challenge there. So by understanding the potential radiation, showing that the radiation is in people's phone, or the radiation can be caused by people's Wi-Fi, that it can be caused by their domestic microwaves, that it can be caused by fast rotating metal objects, like, I don't know, an electric motor spinning around in a blender, you know. By showing that these things are present in the environment, the work to find the shielding solutions will have benefits much broader than just enabling cold transmutation of nuclei, the energy solutions, the matter transformation, the remediation, all these kind of technologies. And this will allow us to deliver the third aim of the project and to go ahead and deliver, hopefully, one or more, or ideally all, of these minimum viable products that we are trying to deliver. And hopefully we can use the concept of the decentralized autonomous organization, DAO, to produce a resilient and robust organization that can deliver the promise here. And just quickly, one of the key things that I shared in Strasbourg, and that presentation will be open for review in a few days, hopefully, was that in the works that we are delving into with greater fidelity, because we have access to the materials now, there were toroidal structures that had substructures in them, and that indeed Matsumoto had observed in the early 1990s a toroidal structure that was made of toroids, that was made of substructures, and that it would appear it was in fact 48 subdivisions. I cannot believe it. This has been an amazing journey, and thank you to all of those that have supported any of the researchers that we have interacted with, the researchers that are currently working with the project. And look out for the Matsumoto Kickstarter, which is going to be coming in the next couple of weeks. I very much encourage you to support that. There will be rewards that you can have, hopefully in time for Christmas. If you want to get this as a gift to yourself or a gift to a third party, you will be enabling, hopefully, one of the most important records of a scientific discovery in the history of humanity. And it would be a great honor to his family to make that happen. So, with that said, I will say, and I've changed screens because I want to go back to the front screen. This was Ode Shielding Opportunity, enabling Relentless. My name is Bob Greenyer. This is the 22nd of September, 2024. Good health to you all. I think we have a beautiful golden age ahead of us. Buenas noches, dobranoc, good night.